Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, as you see what's going on a lovely island of Fawn. Hello, today, late night episode of course, D&D as per usual. Just more of like a fun combat session this week. Group 1, of course. Well, hold on, I made it sound like only Group 1 has fun combat sessions, that's what I mean. I meant, of course, because it's Wednesday. But yeah, I don't really have much to say, at least from like a DM design perspective. Like again, these things which are happening right now in both groups are meant to be sort of like palate cleansers, meant to give a sort of break from the intensities that they had before. But good evening everyone, right now in Fawnhallow it's 10:41 PM on Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. The good thing about having two D&D campaigns is because when you have a lot of ideas, it's just like, oh, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure how it would fit in this campaign, that's okay, I'll just put it in this campaign instead. And this is one which I initially was going to do for the other campaign, but then it was a combat idea, and I was like, they've done so much combat recently that maybe let's give them a chance to do something else instead. But this combat basic idea is basically just an absolute mishmash of random spells and stuff slinging. So basically, the concept behind it was I want basically like random magical spells and effects to go off, but of course that's got like a really big magical sort of background, which has a lot of like lore baked into it. If you're just like, oh, you're just like in this room where magic goes off like crazy, which I didn't have like that sort of setup before. What I did is I used the made up magical items, which are kind of like magical scrolls, except for instead of scrolls, they're crystals, and when the crystals get used or break, they cast a spell, and they have random spells trapped inside of them just to add an element of weirdness and randomness. And then they were things where kobolds stole them basically from the people transporting them, and the kobolds, you know, they didn't have to, and it seemed like they actually weren't going to for a bit, but if you fight the kobolds, because they're like kobold bandits, then basically the kobolds would use these magic spells to try and make the battle disruptive, essentially. And boy oh boy, did I not realise quite how crazy and disruptive it was going to be, in a really fun way. Well, I thought it was quite fun, but maybe they didn't. I think it had fun. I'm trying to think what was this first spell which was cast. I can't remember off the top of my head. I am trying to remember, but I can't remember. But there was a lot of spells. I had a list of, like, they had an initial encounter with them where I basically sort of dropped for him. Because this entire encounter is over, I'm okay with talking behind the scenes about it. I had an initial encounter with them where they saw a small amount of kobolds who would run away basically as soon as any sort of danger was present, where one of them drops the crystal and it casts a random spell. In this case it was a silence spell, so that sort of like it drops a little seed of them being like, oh, what was that about? That's something interesting, that's weird. They can investigate, they can find their own crystal, which I thought they might have like tried to use themselves just to see what would happen, but they didn't. Then they track the kobolds back to the cave, and here's where I expected them to want to fight them, because kobold bandits, that sort of thing, with disruptive people, and often D&D is about sort of fighting these monsters, right? But then actually they just asked for shovels from them, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess they'll just like not do this encounter. And I was like, in my head I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll save this magical sort of like flux thing for maybe like a different encounter, or maybe the other group will run into it instead or something. But then they went back to go defeat them anyway, and I would say the fight was absolutely chaotic. Like, it didn't even start that chaotic. I can't remember what I'm still trying to remember what the first spell that was cast was, but I genuinely can't. The first one that was cast was Calm Emotions, which I think was a really good one to sort of set up the fight. Like, again, I bent some rules exactly of how these spells are cast and that sort of thing. You might be like, that's not how the spells work. Rules is written, this would not be possible. And I say, oh well, too bad that I'm DM, so I can decide how the world works. But of course, you probably didn't say that. So it cast Calm Emotions on literally everyone there. So then it was just like, oh, you don't see them as enemies, etc., until you get attacked, or someone like one of your friends gets damaged or something like that. Magical P Cheetah Pop is around 2 million. Okay, I guess I should do the daily quest then for Neopets. So I'm doing this at the same time. I'm playing all my games at the same time while doing this, because of course in D&D night it's difficult to find the time necessarily to do so. I actually did some drawing yesterday, which is crazy, because it's like the first time I actually had time to do some drawing whatsoever. So I made a tiny little bit of progress with actually drawing the thumbnail art, which was always good, I think. So yeah, they're basically for a load of magical spells. I got a load of spells, some level 1, some level 2, and then like 1 or 2 level 3 spells. Not many, and you'll see which level 3 spell I chose for maximum, I suppose, disruption for fun. In a bit, but if I remember the spells, like first one was Calm Emotions, which hit most of them, or like half of them saved, half of them failed, and then it was like, I mean, the entire fight was a bit of a mess anyway, because they like went about it like a very strange way in a sense, in a very confusing way, whereas like we kind of negotiated and kind of didn't, but it was very funny, I would say, memorable. The second spell that was cast was, what was cast? Oh, was it Plant Growth? No, it wasn't Plant Growth. I need to look at a list of spells. I've closed it now, so who knows where it's gone. Okay, here we go. Let me look at a list of spells. I'm not going to say all the spells because they've not discovered what spells are in them. But there were some fun ones. Oh, I think the second one was Jump, where the first one was like Calm Emotions, and the second one was like, okay, you know, it can only affect one person, so I'm going to have, you know, the 2 closest people roll d20, the highest person will be affected, and they're like, oh no, something bad's going to happen, but then it was like, no, it's Jump, you can jump 3 times as far during this combat, which is great, because I feel like there's a lot of spells which don't see the light of day. Because it's really hard to justify to yourself, why would I ever take Jump as a spell? But having it as like a free sort of thing tied with something else, like, you know, within an item or within like a context of this, makes it more fun. It makes it more usable. There's a lot of spells which would never see the light of day but if you like pair them up with something, pair them as like a free gift, I suppose, for players, then of course I'll use them, because why not? Because they can be fun. Jump is a really fun spell, but it just like isn't very practical most of the times, because there's not many times where you have to be like, I need to jump 3 times as far. But so be it. It's just, I remember it from Baldur's Gate. It was the first time, I suppose, I really played like a strength-based character in this sort of game, and my character could jump just insanely far for the majority of it, because, you know, I put all my things into strength, and it was basically anytime there was like a ledge too far away, they'd be like, "Dear darling, can you jump that far?" And I'd be like, "Yep," whoop, and my character would just like fly across the screen. it was genuinely a lot of fun. And then it got really interesting, because I think the next spell that was cast was Plant Growth, which was one of the 2, I think, or one of the few level 3 spells, undisclosed amount of level 3 spells. Plant Growth, all I wanted was basically something to put difficult terrain down on the ground. But I didn't, this is my bad, I didn't read the spell closely enough, because it seems that Plant Growth does not have a duration, like it doesn't time out after a while, and its actual difficult terrain is very, very punishing. It's for every 1 foot, it's basically quarter speed rather than half speed. And not only that, I thought it was quite small. I didn't realise it's about 100-foot radius. So it literally covered the entire map of difficult terrain, which I was like, I didn't see this coming. But so strangely enough, it's almost like I planned it, which I promise you I didn't, if you are one of my players watching. One of the players, of course, had Jump, so he could actually just navigate by just like jumping through, or at least that's how I wrote it. And I was like, that's very funny. And then the next one, which was cast, it was really funny, because one of my friends was just like, oh, what if it's Fireball? Like, we blast on all of us and we die. And lo and behold, one of the ones I put in was Fireball itself, just to see what would happen, because I was like, maybe there's not a chance it will turn up. Because actually what I thought they would do is, I thought they would run and pick up some of these crystals and use them as well in the battle, but they wanted to actually preserve them, so fair enough. But they found some of the crystals, and one of it tossed. It rolled. I'm not going to tell you what number it rolled, because that would, I suppose, give away how many necessarily there are. And the kobold rolled a Fireball, and it hit everyone. It hit all the party members, including the summon, and it hit most of the main enemies as well, and I think killed one of the kobolds as well. It was insanely funny as well, as when I was rolling it, because in Foundry Virtual Tabletop it's very strange, because you can actually hear the DM roll, interestingly enough, but you don't know how much a DM rolls. And my friend was just like, how much are you rolling, dear darling? And then I got the grand reveal of like, you know how you were joking about Fireball for the past like 5-10 minutes? Well, it turns out that as this crystal light comes down and it lands and shatters, it does nothing for a second, and then a huge fiery explosion engulfs everything. And because of Plant Growth, I was like, okay, this terrain is going to be on fire for the next turn before it gets put out. And that did a lot of damage. Like one of them was took a lot of damage already because he challenged. Long story short, he challenged the kobold leader to like a duel, kind of. I mean, it didn't really stay a duel. He got downed. I'm not sure by the fireball or not. But that happened. But it was basically just like maximum chaos, that sort of thing. So yeah, the fireball, and then it like burnt up the entire area. And then, no joke, the next one was silence, which I didn't think, silence again, which I didn't think would be all that crazy, to be perfectly honest, that, if it happened. But it turns out that silence actually was pretty daring for combined with the difficult terrain, because it meant you couldn't get out of the silence very well. This is why it's not possible really in actual combat, because these are all concentration spells, I believe. Actually, plant growth might not be, now I think about it. But a lot of these are concentration spells, and you'd have to have multiple casters to stack them on, so it really only happened in like major turning boss fights, right? But the combination of silence plus difficult terrain meant that the spellcaster couldn't like do anything. And then the next one was gust of wind, which was thrown from the perfect angle of one of the kobolds to basically create a tunnel of gust of wind directly outside of a cave. Like it pushed people out the cave. To be fair, I also ruled it wrong. I thought it was when it happened, they would all had to make a save, or maybe they did actually, I can't remember. But it seems that it's only on the start of your turn if you start in the wind tunnel. So that was very funny. There was also like one of them was thrown, and it was a prayer of healing. I think that was the second one actually. Got thrown and they all got healed, and they were like, oh, maybe there can be some good effects as well. There's a couple of them which I foresaw could be a really devastating combo together. One of the spells which didn't get released, but I definitely did not see plant growth and silence. So I mean, we'll see when or how they might use them. I basically gave them like a load of random magical tool items and went, have fun with it. Another one I did as well is like when the battle started getting towards the end, the kobold leader had a deck of illusions, and he threw a card down and summoned a knight and 4 guards, and they all just went, what the heck? This guy can summon things? But of course they didn't know it was an illusion. So it was like with his dying breath, he summoned these things and then perished. And it's just like, oh my god, what are we going to do? Because now we've got this incredibly difficult terrain we're now fighting on, and we're fighting like these guards we don't even particularly want to fight against or whatever. And then there was a very scary moment, of course, when 3 of the guards would walk up to one of the players, surround her, and then roll to attack. And I don't really know exactly when you're meant to reveal it's an illusion, but it said any physical contact reveals it's an illusion. And they all rolled, and they some of them hit, and I was just like, okay, the swords just pass through you, essentially. And I said it in a more like revelation way, and I'm sure they must have all breathed a sigh of relief, where they were just like, okay, you know, Dear Darling's not a psychopath who made us fight a really difficult encounter and then made us fight a knight and 4 guards on top of it. Well, I try not to actually make 2 insane combat encounters, but I want them to be memorable at the very least. But there you go, like random magics, like the sort of like magical spell flux idea was an idea I had for like this battleground, and I thought it might be something I bring back, scaled up to a different version, I suppose, at some point. But this is more like an introductory one. It was just meant to be a light-hearted, fun combat, where it was like really silly and ridiculous, but almost ended up being quite lethal, because one of the people to get downed, they got a death saving throw because they were lying in burnt by the fire. But yeah, it was it was nearly lethal because he was downed inside the silence, and the healer, the only one who has healing spells, was also basically trapped in the silence as well because of a giant difficult terrain which surrounded everything, which is why I was like, okay, this is a lot more dangerous than I expected it to be. But fire was the thing I just randomly said. Initially I was going to say it burnt all the plants and then left nothing awake, and then one of my friends was like, shouldn't it set it on fire? And I was like, that's a really good idea, it should set it on fire. I love it when my players do that, like not in the sense that like they're digging their own grave, but it shows that they're engaged enough with the story where they're like, yeah, give me this disadvantage, make this harder for us because that makes more sense, that makes the story more engrossing. But that's what I love. I think it's probably because there's a sense of maturity, I suppose, around all the players. Everyone understands the premise when no one's trying to cheat the system and trying to be like, oh yes, I'm going to be the one who not min-max this game, but who cheats the system and makes sure I'm a game. I'm going to cheat, I'm going to lie about my roles, I'm going to do X, Y, Z to try and game it, essentially. When we're all just here to have a fun time, we understand the rules are there to allow creative expression as well as, you know, put a hold to anything too crazy at the same time. Yeah, I don't know what else I was going to say. It was a fun time, like random magical spells. Kind of like wild sorcerer, I suppose, energy. Yeah, you might be like, do you have like other combat encounters like dreamed up? I have a lot of concepts for combat encounters which I think could be fun, but not all of them are quite fully realized. This was just one where I was just like, okay, let's get like some ready, and this is one which I felt like it could happen now, may not have happened. But yeah, it's a thing that I would say I think is my weakness right now at DMing is traveling, you know, as well. Because, you know, I put things far apart from each other because that's just how it is. There needs to be a lot of wilderness in D&D. Or it doesn't have to be, at least in these classic sort of D&D systems. But I don't know what to do while they're traveling, necessarily. That's something I need to get used to. It's sort of like you have like random encounters here and there, which I will do, but I'm just like, how many of these do I do? How much is reasonable? Do I just sort of like jump ahead to like, oh, this is like when you arrive in town? Because the town is kind of when interesting things happen, I guess. So there's probably nothing really wrong with it. It kind of feels a bit weird. It's like, oh, you need to travel for 1.5 days. What are you going to do? Do you have any conversations and that sort of thing? But it's not like we're going to talk for 1.5 days. We're not going to roleplay 1.5 days of conversation. Or maybe they will. I don't really know. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't expect to just talk about D&D today, but here we go. I guess that's kind of what happens when I basically just spend my entire evening playing D&D, to be perfectly honest. It's a fun time. It's a fun time. I enjoy it a lot. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I was going to say. Because I guess a nicer sort of like a DM peek behind the curtain. Certainly, I'm not going to pretend like I'm an experienced DM. I'm not like anywhere near like the levels of like Matt Mercer, Brennan E. Mulligan, other people. I don't really know many other DMs. I know there's that other woman who's sometimes on Critical or on Dimension 20, like Avria. I don't actually know how you say her name. I've only ever seen it written down because I haven't actually watched. Abria. What other DMs are there? I don't know. Matt Colville, I think, is one, right? Anyway, I'm definitely not on their level, but at least it might be fun to see my sort of thought process around it. I talk about like thought process through like game design quite a lot, despite the fact I'm not a game designer or game creator in the first place. But I think a lot of the things sort of hold true with D&D, like encounter design as well. So perhaps it's no surprise. Anyway, I'm going to round this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. Bye-bye for now.